Darkness left a fingerprint. A Nero Wolfe mystery in 8 chapters. Darkness did leave a fingerprint, but instead of hiding the killer, it betrayed him. Chapter 1, The Man in the Light. If it had been up to Nero Wolfe, there would have been no case, no corpse, and no reason for me to spend my morning in a photography studio smelling like old wood and chemicals. Unfortunately, it was not up to Nero Wolfe. It was up to a magazine editor with an idea, a checkbook, and the kind of persistence that could bore through concrete. Archie, Wolfe had said the day before, glaring at me over his beer, "I have no interest in having my face pinned to a printed page for housewives to consider while they butter toast." Sure, I'd told him. But the editor has an interest in paying for it. Handsomely. And the article calls you the last word in private detection in New York. I thought that might tickle your vanity. He snorted. My vanity is not so cheaply tickled. Why must they also append a photograph? Because you're famous, I said. And because words without pictures are like beer without foam. People feel cheated. In the end, he'd grumbled, but he'd agreed, on the condition that this outrage be handled by a competent photographer, not some shutter-happy imbecile with a flashbulb and a lack of scruples. That's how, next morning, I found myself at Maurice Kittering's studio, Portraits in Light and Shade, on the 3rd floor of a narrow building just west of Madison Avenue, alone. Wolfe had decided, quite reasonably from his point of view, that I should go ahead first, inspect the arrangements, and report back. If the man passed inspection, Wolfe would submit to being photographed for exactly 7 minutes, not a second more. The studio was long and high-ceilinged, the windows painted over. Lamps on stands rose like metallic saplings. A gray backdrop hung at one end. At the other, a swinging door marked darkroom. The air smelled of chemicals and dust, with a Boston-ware twist of bad coffee. A young woman in a dark green suit came toward me. She moved like someone who knew where everything was and didn't intend to bump into any of it. "Good morning," she said. "Miss Marsh. Felicity Marsh. Can I help you?" "You already are," I said. "Archie Goodwin. I'm the unfortunate soul who has to drag Nero Wolfe anywhere that isn't his office. He agreed to let Mr. Kittering shoot him. I came to make sure your boss doesn't use a meat cleaver for a light meter." That got a small smile. She had a serious face that looked like it didn't smile too easily. "Maurice is finishing with a client," she said. "He insists on overseeing all important sittings. Would you like to see the setup?" "Sure. Might as well know what kind of torture he has in mind." She led me to the chair set in front of the gray backdrop. The lamps formed a half-circle around it. "The lighting is adjustable," she said. "Mr. Wolfe won't be dazzled. If he is," I told her, "you'll hear about it. In 3 languages." The swinging darkroom door opened. Out came Maurice Kittering himself. Early 40s, trim, fair hair brushed back, tie just a little too perfect. He had charm, and he knew it. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, holding out a hand. "A pleasure. I'm honored that Mr. Wolfe has deigned to let me point a lens at him." "Don't ever tell him you've pointed anything at him," I advised. "He considers that hostile action." Kittering laughed. "I've dealt with actors and judges, Mr. Goodwin. I can manage one detective." "Speaking of actors," Felicity said, "Mr. Amberley is waiting in the small sitting room. You promised him proofs this morning." Kittering made a face. "Mr. Amberley always believes he is the only man in New York with a face." 5 minutes. He disappeared through a side door. I filed the name, Henry Amberley. While Felicity fussed with a lamp, the front door opened and the air pressure in the room shifted. You can tell when a star walks in, even if she's only got Broadway and a few glossy covers to her name. She was tall, wearing a fur-collared coat and a hat that shaded her eyes just enough to make you want to see more. I recognized her, Vivian Vale, whose photograph had caused more men to miss subway stops than any transit strike. "Felicity, darling," she said, "tell me Maurice is ready. I have a rehearsal at 2 and a headache at 1. Her gaze slid to me. "Ah. The detective. You solve crimes, I cause them, at least on stage. Between us, the city ought to be trembling." "New York trembles all the time," I said. "Usually from the subway. But I'll take partial credit if you insist." Vivian gave a cool little smile and turned back to Felicity. "He promised to show me the proofs today. I swear, if a single negative of me leaves this building without my say-so, Maurice will rue the day he discovered shadows." "You know he wouldn't," Felicity told her quickly. "Wouldn't he?" Vivian muttered, low enough that she wasn't necessarily talking to us. The bell rang again. This time it was a small, neat man with a pinched mouth and gold-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. "Depends who's asking." "Edgar Prowse," he said. "I'm Mr. Kittering's partner." In a manner of speaking. The way he said it suggested that manner was mostly financial. "Banking and photography," he added. "Two kinds of exposure." It was a nice little group. One ambitious assistant, one egomaniac artist, one money man, one temperamental star, and one grumbling client in the back room. You could almost hear fate checking off a list. Felicity finally stepped back from the lamps. "All right," she said. "If you'll just sit there for a light test, Mr. Goodwin, we can see if this setup will suit Mr. Wolfe." I lowered myself into the chair. "Make me look intelligent," I told her. "Wolfe won't believe it, but we can try." At that precise moment there was a sharp pop, a crackle, and the lamps flickered. "Not again," Felicity breathed. The room went black. Somebody gave a little gasp. A man swore, Amberly's voice from the back. Something scraped, maybe a stand. A brush of air went across my face like someone moving fast. "Don't move." Felicity's voice snapped in the dark. "The fuse has blown. I'll get a torch." She'd barely taken a step when there came a strangled sound, part grunt, part smothered cry, and then a heavy thud from across the room. For a second, nobody said anything. Then we got the noise you always get when people realize something has gone wrong and they might be next: movement, overlapping questions, nervous laughs. I stayed where I was. When a woman in charge tells the room not to move, I like to see what happens to the ones who obey and the ones who don't. A thin beam cut through the dark as Felicity's torch clicked on. The pale circle wandered and then froze. Maurice Kittering was down on the floor near the darkroom door, one hand half raised as if he was reaching for something that hadn't been there. His face was twisted. Near his fingers lay an overturned lamp, its cable coiled like a snake with a raw, stripped patch near the end. Felicity's face went dead white. He must have tripped," she whispered. "In the dark. Anne. She didn't finish." I was already off the chair and moving closer, careful where I put my feet. If you've seen as many dead men as I have, you get to know the ones that went fast. Kittering had. Felicity said, "It was an accident." "It has to be an accident." "Maybe," I told her. "But I once knew a guy who said New York accidents are like New York cab drivers. There's always somebody behind them." And somewhere in that studio, under the torch beam and the smell of burned insulation, I had the feeling that someone's hand had just been pulled back out of the dark. And it had left a mark. Chapter 2, Death on the Floor. If there's one thing the NYPD does fast, it's turn up when there's a dead body in a place that prints society pages. By the time I'd checked Kittering's pulse, none, and told Felicity not to faint on the backdrop, the uniforms had sealed the door and Inspector Kramer himself was coming in, chewing an unlit cigar like it owed him money. He saw me, scowled, and groaned. "Goodwin," he said. "You got radar for corpses or does Wolfe rent you out by the body?" "Nice to see you too, Inspector," I told him. "You should know by now, if I'm here, I didn't bring the entertainment." His gaze slid to Maurice kittering on the floor, the overturned lamp, the cable with the stripped patch. A police doctor was already down on one knee, fingers at the wrist. "Dead," the doc said. "Look at the burns. Palm and neck." He hit live current and it hit back. "The cable's frayed," Kramer grunted. The doc shook his head. "Not just frayed. That's a clean strip. Somebody took the insulation off. Carefully." "Accident," Edgar Prowse piped up from his corner, voice thin. "Maurice was careless. The wiring here's terrible. Miss Marsh said so." Kramer turned on him. "We'll decide what it is." "You are?" "Edgar Prowse. Silent partner," he said. "Banking and photography." "Yeah." Kramer grunted. "In my experience, where money and art get married, homicide's often the kid." He went through the routine, names, addresses, statements. I could have recited half of it before he opened his notebook. Felicity stood rigid, fingers twisted together. "We had a fuse blow last week," she told him. I complained. "The landlord said it would be fixed when convenient." Maurice joked that, "a little darkness makes the art better." "Aha," Kramer said. "What about the cable?" She shook her head helplessly. "I don't touch the wiring. I move lamps, yes, but I don't strip anything. I didn't know it was damaged." Kramer jerked his head toward me. "Goodwin." "I was sitting in that chair," I said. "You can check the grooves, my soul's still in it." Lamps popped, lights went out. In the dark I heard Felicity say, "Don't move," Amberly swear, Vivian gasp, something scrape, and then a thud where he is now. That's about it. Vivian sat in the chair now, gloves off, one hand flat on her skirt, the other holding a cigarette she'd forgotten to light. Her lipstick looked brighter than her face. "The lights went out," she said when Kramer turned to her. "I was standing by the wall, exactly there. I did not move. I heard something fall and then that sound. I did not lay a finger on Maurice. I need him alive more than dead. He had negatives I care about." Prowse cleared his throat. "Miss Vale has had disputes with Mr. Kittering over certain photographs." Vivian's head snapped around. "If you're trying to suggest I killed him to keep my publicity tidy, Edgar, I'll sue you for slander and bad manners." Maurice knew better than to cross me. He was more useful breathing. Mr. Amberley got dragged out of the back room, belly first, face flushed. "I was waiting," he complained. He said 10 minutes, then there's all this traffic, and, well, the lights go out, I hear someone swear, probably me, and then a bang. I thought a stand toppled. I didn't even know he was dead till the doll with the torch started screaming." Kramer listened, wrote, and snorted. "To me," he said finally, "this looks like this: bad wiring, a careless photographer, too many lamps. Lights blow, he grabs a cable, gets fried. Accidental death in a place that can afford better fuses. A coroner's inquest and I go home." "That's one way," I said. "But the doc told you that insulation didn't chew off by itself. Somebody skinned that wire like an apple." I squatted down by the lamp. On the stripped section there was a little smear of something dark and greasy. "Also," I added, "whoever did it was careful. One clean patch, right where a hand would grab. That's not wear and tear, Inspector. That's prep work." Kramer grunted. "Photographer could have done it himself." "Sure," I said. "If he'd developed a taste for Russian roulette with AC current." He didn't like that. He tugged his cigar out, looked at it, then jammed it back in. "All right," he said grudgingly. "Maybe it's a little tickle above an accident. Until I know different, it's an investigation. Nobody leaves town. Miss Marsh, you're closed for business till I say otherwise. Goodwin, you don't stir this up for Wolfe yet." "Too late on that," I told him. You can't ask a man to sit for a portrait and not tell him he's lost the photographer. He groaned. Fine. Tell him. But tell him also this is my show. If he starts playing conductor from that damned yellow chair of his, I'll... He didn't finish the threat, because they were bringing the stretcher in. I stood back and watched them carry out Maurice Kittering, the genius of shadows, who'd picked up one shadow too many. I knew one thing, regardless of what Kramer called it, Wolfe was not going to file this one under accident. Chapter 3, Casting the Usual Suspects. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe didn't rise for the occasion. You don't get that kind of acrobatics out of him unless the house is on fire. He was in his chair, of course, at his desk, with a bottle of beer on the side and his lips doing the thing they do when they're trying not to look interested. You were late, he said. Explain. I explained. When I got to the part about the cable, the burn marks, and the doc's opinion, his eyes narrowed. And Kramer, he asked, what does he say? That gravity plus stupidity equals accident, I told him. He's hedging, though. The cut in the insulation bothers him. Wolfe grunted. And you, naturally, poke it. Naturally. I also gave your condolences to the late Maurice for wasting your morning. He ignored that. Give me the people, he said. Surname, occupation, and grievance. I named them. Felicity Marsh, I said. Assistant. Smart, underpaid, overused. 3 years in, still treated like the new kid. Promised partnership, got Prowse instead. Electricity scares her in the right way, she'd been complaining about the wiring for weeks. Her grievance is legitimate, Wolfe said. And she is the one who orders you all not to move in the dark. Admirable presence of mind. Or foreknowledge. Edgar Prowse. Banker. Money man. Silent partner, emphasis on silent. Looks like every dollar that has ever left his hands has left a scar. Maurice spent more than he made. Prowse is not happy about it. Greed, Wolfe said. A cheap motive, but a frequent one. Vivian Vale, I went on. Stage star. Has some old photos she doesn't want the public seeing. Claims he promised to destroy them. Doesn't really believe it. Threatened to kill him once, but says it was theatrical. An actress threatening death, Wolfe muttered. We mustn't take that too seriously or Broadway will be half empty. Henry Amberley. Client. Annoyed about waiting. Admits to swearing in the dark and not much else. Not bright, but enthusiastic. And Kittering? Wolfe asked. Your impression. Charming, vain, used to control, I said. Liked shadows and the power they give you. Wolfe took that in. Any others? There's talk of a landlord and some workmen, I said, and Kramer mentioned a mystery woman in a big hat seen leaving by the back stairs 2 days ago. Could be someone's wife, mistress, or both. Pfui. Kramer will plod through them, Wolfe said. Our interest lies with those in the room. And with Kittering's history. Does he have family? Brother, I told him. Lionel. Lives in Brooklyn, or maybe Queens, Kramer's not sure. Not on good terms. Supposedly, too ill to receive visitors. Brothers rarely kill each other with delicacy, Wolfe said. It is usually direct and brutal. But we will not neglect him. For now, the psychology is simple. A man who collects images of others often collects something else, obligations. He may have been a blackmailer. Felicity hinted at that, I said. And Vivian practically stamped leverage across his forehead. Then we have, Wolfe summed up, a man who plays with secrets dying in a contrived accident. The list of people who might wish that is not short. The phone rang. I got it. Kramer's voice came down the line, crisp. Goodwin. Put Wolfe on. I didn't bother asking if he wanted to talk to him, I just spun the instrument and said, Inspector Kramer for you. Yes. Wolfe said. We've got something, Kramer said. You'll like it. Fingerprints. On what? Wolfe asked. The stripped section of the cable, Kramer said. Nice clear set. Not the photographers, not the girls, not the stars, not the bankers, not yours, thank God. We ran them through. They match prints we lifted a year ago on a gun in an old domestic case that never went anywhere. Name's Lionel Kittering. Wolfe's brows went up. I could tell from where I was. The brother, he said. The brother, Kramer confirmed. Who swears he hasn't been near the studio in months. His prints are all over the live spot. He's lying. I'm getting a warrant and dragging his sick act out of bed. May I ask, Wolfe said, whether the prints on the cable are clear? Perfect, Kramer said. Whirl and loop like a diagram in a textbook. Why? Because, Wolfe said mildly, a man groping in the dark for support does not usually leave perfect prints. He leaves smears. The clarity interests me. Oh, for the love of, Kramer broke off. Look, Wolfe, the evidence is what it is. If you want to sit there and call it too perfect while I do the actual work, feel free. I'm telling you we have our suspect. He hung up. Wolfe replaced the receiver with care, leaned back, and closed his eyes. Archie, he said. Yes, sir. We must see Lionel Kittering. Not Kramer. Us. Before Kramer frightens him into foolishness. Go. Take a cab. I will not have this case reduced to a fingerprint fetish. On my way, I said. Want a souvenir from Brooklyn? If you find any rationality there, Wolfe muttered, bring it back in a jar. That was how I came to spend the rest of the day meeting a man whose fingerprints were yelling, guilty, while everything inside me was betting the other way. Chapter 4, The Brothers' Print. Lionel Kittering lived in a narrow house on a shady block that had seen better mortgages. The blinds were half drawn, the atmosphere said, debts, more than, home. A woman opened the door, thin, nervous, 40-something. Mrs. Lionel Kittering, I diagnosed. Yes, she said. Archie Goodwin, I told her. I work for Nero Wolfe. We're looking into your brother-in-law's death. We'd like a word with your husband before the city does something less polite. Fear hit her eyes like a flashbulb. He's ill, she said. The doctor. I know, I said. But the doctor isn't the one with a warrant in his pocket. The police are on their way. I'm not here to hurt him, I'm here to listen before they start shouting. May I? She hesitated, then stepped aside. He's in the front room. Lionel was waiting in an armchair like a man sitting for his own arraignment. Thin, shoulders slumped, hair graying at the edges. He had the look of somebody who'd spent 20 years in an office doing things nobody thanked him for. I suppose you're here about Maurice, he said, before I could open my mouth. The inspector called. He says my fingerprints, his voice trailed off. I sat opposite him. Let's do this straight, I said. Yes, your prints were found on the stripped piece of cable that killed your brother. No, I don't think you went over there, did a neat wiring job, and then waited in the hallway. Tell me how you last saw your brother. He took off his glasses and wiped them on a handkerchief that had seen better days. I hadn't seen him in months, he said. Almost a year. We quarreled. He came here to ask for money, of course. He always did. How long ago? I asked. Last spring, he said. He wanted a loan. I refused. I told him I was tired of rescuing him. He said I was a dull clerk, that I didn't understand art. I told him art wouldn't pay for mother's medical bills. It ended badly. He swallowed. I haven't set foot in his studio since. Has he ever photographed you? I asked. He blinked. Once. Years ago. He wanted to experiment. You have an interesting face, Lionel, he said. Full of resignation. I didn't like it. He posed me and fussed and complained I didn't know how to sit. That was that. Did you touch his equipment? I asked. The lamps, the cables, the stands. No. He wouldn't let me. He said I'd break something. Why are you asking this? Because your prints are on that cable, I said. And you're not the type to burglarize a studio and strip wires on your day off. He stared down at his hands, which were trembling. I swear to you, he said quietly, I didn't go there. I may have hated the way he lived, but I didn't want him dead. He was my brother. He meant that. I've seen guys bluff in interrogation rooms and I've seen guys lie on witness stands. Lionel Kittering didn't have the muscle for that kind of acting. Just then there was a heavy knock at the door, the kind that isn't a salesman. I didn't need X-ray vision to know it was Kramer, but I had to let him in anyway. He came in with a sergeant behind him and saw me. Oh, hell, he said. Beats me how you always get there first. We found our man, Wolfe sends you. Typical. I thought you found a fingerprint, I said. The man's still up for debate. Not for long, Kramer said grimly. Lionel Kittering, I'm placing you under arrest for suspicion of murder. Hold it, I cut in. You going to let him answer one question before you drag him out? Kramer glared. Make it short. Lionel, I asked, have you ever had your fingerprints taken? He frowned. Once. There was some trouble at the firm. A theft in the office. They fingerprinted all the staff to compare. I was cleared, of course. Kramer snorted. And they kept the prints on file. That's how we matched. Sure, I said. But there's another set, too. Kramer swung to me. What the hell are you talking about? Nothing you want to hear yet, I told him. You'll just go back to the office and yell at the air. He opened his mouth, then shut it and turned back to Lionel. You'll have your chance to tell this story downtown, he said. Come on. They took him. Mrs. Kittering's face crumpled. I got out before I had to watch any more. Back on the street, I called Wolfe from a payphone. Well, he asked. Well, I said, if this guy is a killer, then I'm the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's too scared of his own pulse. We anticipated that, Wolfe said. The question is, how did his fingerprint reach that cable? I looked up at the sky, which was the usual New York shade of gray. I've got a hunch, I said. But I think the answer isn't on a wire. It's in a cabinet with a lock. In the studio? Wolfe asked. Right, I said. Felicity mentioned a cabinet where they kept plates and delicate negatives. Kittering was the kind of guy who'd like having little trophies of people. And if he was collecting images, maybe he was collecting other impressions too. There was a long pause. Come home, Wolfe said at last. We must plan our next trespass with more precision. When Wolfe says, trespass, he doesn't mean breaking and entering. He means walking into your place of business and stripping it to the studs using logic while you watch. But first we had to open that cabinet. Chapter 5, Prints in a Drawer. The next morning I went back to the studio. Kramer had released it with a yellow-eyed warning to Felicity that everything stays put. The chalk mark where Kittering's head had been was still ghosting the floor. Felicity let me in, looking as if she'd slept about as much as a night watchman in a haunted house. Inspector Kramer said. I know what he said, I told her. This isn't me tampering with evidence. This is me helping make sense of it. Trust me, you want this solved right, not fast. That's a line I have to use more often than I'd like. In her case it worked. She stepped aside. What do you want? She asked. The cabinet keys, I said. The one you said holds the plates and the more delicate negatives. Her expression tightened. Maurice kept that locked, she said. I've never been allowed to touch it. Then today is a big day in your career, I said. Will you open it, or do I call Kramer and tell him there's something he forgot to look at? That did it. She went to a small drawer, took out a key ring, and handed it to me. You do it, she said. I don't want to see. The cabinet held trays, boxes, envelopes, everything labeled in neat, damp-proof handwriting. I slid open a long, narrow drawer and stopped. This one didn't hold photographs. It held cards. Little white cards, each in its own sleeve, each with a name and a date written in the same careful hand. Amberley, Henry. Marsh, Felicity. Vale, Vivian. Prowse, Edgar. Kittering, Lionel. Each card had a smudge in the middle, pale gray, with the faint but unmistakable whirls and loops of a fingerprint. Well, I said softly. Maurice liked to keep his clients close. Felicity had come a little closer. She saw the cards and went pale again. What on earth? Fingerprints, I said. All neat, dry, and ready for use. Did you know he had these? No, she whispered. I swear I didn't. I knew he sometimes kept pictures he shouldn't. He called it art. But this. Let me guess how he did it, I said. Client comes in, takes a seat. Maurice says, rest your hand on that little table, it will help you relax. Later, he dusts the table like in the movies, lifts the print, and presses it onto a card. Or maybe his method was fancier. Either way, he got these. I slid Lionel Kittering's card halfway free. The print on it looked like the photo Kramer had shown me at the precinct. It didn't take a genius to see the next move. Imagine, I said, that you want to frame Lionel. You open this drawer, dust this card with powder, lift the print with one of those neat little gelatin pads the cops use, and place it exactly where you need it. On a stripped section of cable, for example. Felicity swallowed hard. Then Lionel is innocent. In my book, he's no longer the guy holding the smoking wire, I said. He's the guy someone else picked as a patsy because his name was convenient and his relationship with Maurice was bad enough. Her hand gripped the back of a chair. Who would know about this cabinet? I asked. Other than Maurice and, now, you and me. Edgar, she said at once. He had to know about everything. The inventory, the insurance. He insisted. Vivian? I asked. She knew Maurice kept things, Felicity admitted. Negatives, mostly. She didn't know where. At least, not that I saw. Anybody else? I pushed. Ever hear Maurice mention a patron? Somebody behind the curtain. She hesitated. There was a man, she said slowly. Maurice called him his patron once. I never saw him. But I heard him in the darkroom. I had come to leave some proofs. The door was ajar. They were talking about keeping things safe. Maurice said, no one can touch us as long as I have them. The other man said, that's our insurance. Recognize the voice? I asked. She shook her head. It was quiet. English. Controlled. Not like Morris's. Fine, I said. Let's assume our mystery patron knew about this library of smudges. He could have told someone to plant Lionel's print. I don't understand, Felicity whispered. Who would do something like that? Why not just shoot Maurice? I finished. Too obvious. A live wire in the dark makes a nice story, old building, bad wiring, unfortunate photographer. The fingerprint makes it better, bitter brother, old fight, motive. Somebody wanted neatness, Miss Marsh. And someone who works with secrets for a living cares a lot about neatness. She lifted her chin. Are you going to tell Kramer? She asked. Eventually, I said. But first I'm going to tell Nero Wolfe. He gets very cranky when he has to think without all the pieces. I took one more look at the drawer full of quiet little betrayals, closed it, and locked the cabinet. Do me a favor, I told Felicity. Don't brag about those cards to anyone. Not even in your sleep. She nodded. I don't think I'll be sleeping much, she said. On my way out, I stopped at a payphone and called the brownstone. I've got your answer, sir, I told Wolfe when he came on. Maurice was keeping more than headshots. He had a fingerprint on everyone who mattered, literally. And somebody used Lionel's card like a rubber stamp. Phwee, Wolfe said. I knew it. Come home. We must now locate the man for whom such an archive would be a treasure chest. Any guesses? I asked. Yes, he said. But I want corroboration, not guesses. Speak to Prowse. Speak again to Miss Vale. Ask who recommended Maurice when they needed something delicate done. When they needed the dirt cleaned up. I said. Precisely, Wolfe answered. We will see whose hands come away least clean. Chapter 6, The Man Who Sold Silence. Prowse's office near Madison wasn't much to look at. The furniture was respectable, the view wasn't, and the air smelled like old paper and worry. He was behind his desk, going through ledgers like they'd personally insulted him. Mr. Goodwin, he said, setting down his pen. Is this another police inquiry? Relax, I told him. I'm freelance trouble. Different flavor. I've been looking at Morris's little cabinet of curiosities. His face froze. I beg your pardon. The fingerprint file, I said. Don't bother pretending you don't know. You're a partner. You sign insurance forms. You know the value of records. He wet his lips. I knew he amused himself with certain things. Photographs that clients might prefer destroyed. He insisted they were art. And the fingerprint cards? I asked. He winced. I suspected. He made jokes. Said every man leaves a mark whether he wants to or not. I told him it was foolish. Dangerous. He laughed. You ever use those cards? I asked. To nudge a debtor? Maybe remind a client you had, leverage. He shook his head. No. I'm a banker, Mr. Goodwin, not a blackmailer. If Maurice had dragged me into anything of that sort, I'd have cut him off. You didn't know he was dead until the police came? I asked. Correct, he said. I was at my office all morning. My secretary can confirm. Lovely, I said. What about the mysterious patron? The man who called those little cards insurance. Ring any bells? He looked away. I handle certain introductions, he said stiffly. When a client of mine has a problem involving a photograph, or a letter, or a witness, I refer them to a man who specializes in such matters. That man, in turn, sometimes used Mr. Kittering for technical services. What man? I asked. He hesitated just long enough to be interesting. Reginald Sykes, he said finally. Attorney. Very discreet. Give me the address, I said. He gave it. I left him looking like he'd just signed his own foreclosure. Vivian Vale's dressing room at the theater was better lit than the studio had been. She was at her mirror, wiping off stage makeup and putting on a different face for real life. You again, she said. I should start charging you admission. Wolfe pays my ticket, I said. And you're worth watching. I'm collecting names. Prowse says a certain Reginald Sykes introduced you to Maurice. Something passed over her expression that wasn't stagecraft. Years ago, she admitted. I was very young. Very foolish. I let a man take photographs of me I shouldn't have. When I sobered up, emotionally, I panicked. Someone referred me to Sykes. He arranged for the negatives to be handled. Later, when I needed portraits, he suggested Maurice. He said Maurice understood discretion. And did he? I asked. For a while, she said. Then he began to keep things. He'd say a shot was too good to destroy. I told him I'd see him in hell if he used them. He laughed. He liked to laugh at threats. Did you ever meet Sykes with Maurice? I asked. Once, she said. In the darkroom. Sykes doesn't like light. He asked Maurice whether certain things were safe. Maurice said he had everything under control. Sykes told him to remember who brought him clients. What kind of man is Sykes? I asked. Her mouth twisted. A man who sells silence, she said. For a fee. That was enough for me. I called Wolfe from a hallway phone. You were right, I told him. Our mystery man has a name, Reginald Sykes. He's the fixer who fixed Vivian's early mistakes and fed Maurice a diet of clients with things to hide. Good, Wolfe said. Now go and watch him at close range. Ask him about insurance. Ask nothing about electricity. I will have Saul Panzer begin a separate line of inquiry. Saul, when I got him later, didn't need much. I gave him Sykes's name and the outline. He grunted once, said, I'll nose around, and hung up. Sykes's office was near Lexington, in a building with brass plaques and quiet carpets. His receptionist was prim and smooth. So was he, when he came out to meet me in a conference room. Mr. Goodwin, he said, extending a hand. A pleasure. I have heard of Mr. Wolfe's work. I hope I never require it. That makes two of us, I said. You know why I'm here. I assume it relates to poor Mr. Kittering's unfortunate accident, he said. A tragic business. He was very talented. He was also storing more fingerprints than the police bureau, I said. You were aware of that? His eyes didn't move much, but they cooled. I was aware, he said, that Mr. Kittering had certain professional habits I did not approve of. I told him to destroy anything that could be used improperly. You ever call those habits insurance? I asked. Perhaps in a dark room, with the safe light on. A photographer might remember. He considered me. You have a picturesque imagination, Mr. Goodwin. I advise you to be cautious where you use it. That sounds almost like a threat, I said pleasantly. Far from it, he said. It is practical advice. My role is to prevent scandals, not create them. I found Maurice useful, when he behaved. Toward the end, he became erratic. He talked too much about selling things. That made him less useful. Useful to whom? I asked. To himself, to his clients, to me, Sykes said. When a man who stores dynamite begins smoking in the same room, those nearby get nervous. Did you visit the studio recently? I asked. Say, in the last week? No, he said. I had no need. I watched his hand on the arm of his chair. The knuckles were white. Have you heard, I asked, that Lionel Kittering's fingerprints were found on the cable that killed his brother? He spread his hands. The police called me. They asked when I last saw Lionel. I told them, briefly, months ago, about a tedious probate. Why? Because Lionel denies being there, I said. And because someone not only stripped that cable in exactly the right spot but also planted that print in exactly the right way. That requires two things, knowledge of forensics and access to Mr. Kittering's little card catalog. I'm a lawyer, Mr. Goodwin, not a laboratory technician, Sykes said coldly. Do you get your ideas from the cinema? I get them from looking at people who make a living out of other people's secrets, I said. You introduced clients to Maurice. You benefited from his files. When he started talking about going freelance with his threats, that would make you very Uncomfortable. Killing him yourself would be clumsy. Getting someone to rig an accident and frame an unpopular brother. That would keep your hands clean. He stood. This interview is over, he said. Unless you have a warrant. No warrant, I said, also rising. Just a feeling that you don't like things you can't control. Maurice got that way. Now he's dead. Whoever did it thinks they left nothing but shadows. I smiled at him. But sometimes darkness leaves fingerprints. He didn't show me out. The receptionist did. Back on the sidewalk, I found Saul leaning against a lamppost like he'd grown there. Well? I asked. He's careful, Saul said. But not perfect. His clerk, Fairchild, was seen at Kittering's building twice this week. Once in office hours. Once late. He told the super he was dropping off papers. Doesn't match Sykes's schedule. Fairchild know his way around a fingerprint pad? I asked. Did a year in a day's office as a junior, Saul said. Sat through 2 forensics demos he shouldn't have understood but did. I checked. Beautiful, I said. Get me everything on Fairchild. Addresses, habits, what coffee he drinks. I think Wolfe will want him for dessert. Saul nodded and disappeared the way Saul does. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe had the look he gets when the pieces line up in his head like a marching band. Report, he said. I reported. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and steepled his fingers. We have it, he said. Now we must choose where to reveal it. Here, I think, not in that miserable studio. It is time for Mr. Sykes to learn that secrets can cost more than they save. Chapter 7, Wolfe reads the fingerprint. If you've never seen Nero Wolfe stage a showdown, you've missed one of the better indoor sports. It's like watching a volcano give a lecture. We had them all in the office by 8 that evening, Felicity Marsh, tight and pale, Edgar Prowse, pinched tighter than ever, Vivian Vale, dressed for a funeral in black silk and contempt, Lionel Kittering, out on bail and looking like a man who expected the floor to arrest him, and Reginald Sykes, smooth as a marble tombstone. Inspector Kramer sat on the red leather chair, big hands on his knees, cigar in his mouth and no smoke by Wolfe's orders. He did not look amused. Saul was upstairs with a 6th guest, Fairchild, Sykes's clerk, who had already cracked under a little careful pressure and was now staying in a guest room with a patrolman in the hall. Wolfe was in his chair behind the desk. I was in mine, notebook handy and feet where he could see them. Ladies and gentlemen, Wolfe said, when they were all arranged, you know why you are here. A man is dead. The police have been offered an explanation, a tragic accident, embellished later by the convenient discovery of a fingerprint. I am here to offer another explanation. Sykes smiled faintly. I confess I'm curious, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe ignored him. Mr. Kittering, he went on, died by electrocution when he grasped a cable whose insulation had been deliberately removed. That is established. The power surge that darkened the studio was not an act of God, but the result of overburdened wiring. That, too, is established. The question is, who stripped the cable, and who chose to decorate it with Lionel Kittering's fingerprint? Lionel squirmed. I told them. Yes, you did, Wolfe said. You told them the truth. You had not been in the studio for nearly a year. You had, however, once sat for your brother, and he, as was his habit, took your photograph and your fingerprint without your knowledge. He nodded at me. I went to the cabinet beside Wolfe's desk, opened it, and brought out a single card in a glassine envelope. This, I said, was in a drawer in the studio. It's labeled Lionel Kittering. It has his print. The same print that appeared on the cable. Vivian inhaled sharply. Prowse made a small squeak. Sykes's eyes flickered, then went flat. Maurice, Wolfe said, was a magpie of human traces. Every client left a piece of themselves behind, an image, yes, but also a fingerprint card. Over time, this became an archive that he and at least one other man referred to as insurance. Miss Marsh heard that word. Felicity nodded, gripping the arms of her chair. I did, she said. In the darkroom. Maurice and a man I didn't see. That man, Wolfe said, was Mr. Sykes. Sykes's jaw tightened. You cannot possibly. I can, and I do, Wolfe said calmly. You are a lawyer specializing in discreet matters. You handle problems involving indiscreet photographs, letters, witnesses. You found Maurice Kittering useful. You also found him increasingly dangerous. He began to think of selling his treasures to the highest bidder. That threatened not only your clients' reputations, but your own business model. You have an inventive mind, Sykes said. But no proof. I have enough, Wolfe said. You knew of the archive. You knew men like Lionel had cards in it. You also knew the studio wiring was faulty, Miss Marsh had complained, and you had been present when a fuse blew. You saw, in that, an opportunity. You suggested to Maurice how tragically easy it would be for an accident to occur in a blackout. You sowed the idea. Perhaps you even meant to use it later on a client of your own. But Maurice annoyed you first. He shifted in his chair, leaning forward slightly. In the weeks before his death, Wolfe said, Maurice apparently told several people he was tired of being someone else's errand boy. He spoke of the press, of selling things. That would have panicked you. You needed him silenced, and you needed someone else to take the blame. Kramer's cigar twitched. He was listening harder than he looked. You are not a man, Wolfe said to Sykes, to climb ladders with a knife in your teeth to strip a cable yourself. You are a man who delegates. So you sent your clerk, Mr. Fairchild, under the pretext of delivering documents, to visit the studio more than once. He expressed a polite interest. He saw the layout. He saw the cabinet. He learned its contents. That proves nothing, Sykes said sharply. Then, Wolfe continued, undisturbed, the day before Morris's death, you arranged a schedule, back-to-back sittings, Mr. Goodwin first to test the lights, Miss Vale for new portraits, Mr. Amberley waiting. Maximum load on the old wiring. You knew a fuse would likely blow. That was the first part. And the cable? Kramer growled. You had already visited Maurice, quietly, one evening, Wolfe said. You had access to the studio when no one else did. You brought with you a small blade, and you stripped a single patch of insulation from one cable, at a point where a hand would naturally grab in the dark. That made the room a loaded gun waiting for someone to pull the trigger. Sykes's face had gone a shade paler, but he held himself in check. After Maurice fell, Wolfe went on, there was confusion. Miss Marsh fetched the torch. Mr. Prowse fussed. Miss Vale was stunned. Mr. Amberley blustered. In that whirl, another man slipped in by the back stairs, Mr. Fairchild, again sent by you. He knew where the cabinet was. He took Lionel's card, dusted it, lifted the print, and pressed it onto the bare cable. Then he left. When Kramer's men arrived later, the fingerprint said, brother. That's a nice story, Sykes snapped. You have the makings of a novelist, Wolfe. But you still have no proof that I ordered any of this, even if your fantasy about my clerk were true. He's right there, Kramer said suddenly, standing up. Wolfe, bring him down. I went to the hall door and signaled. A moment later Saul came in with Fairchild between him and the patrolman. Fairchild looked like a man who had spent an hour trying to argue with his conscience and had lost. Mr. Fairchild, Wolfe said. Would you repeat what you told Inspector Kramer an hour ago? Fairchild swallowed. His eyes flicked to Sykes and away. I went to the studio the night Mr. Kittering died, he said. Mr. Sykes told me to. He said there'd been an unfortunate accident. He said there might be something confusing that needed to be cleared up. He told me to take a small case from his desk. What was in it? Kramer barked. Powder, Fairchild said miserably. Gelatin pads. He'd shown me once how the police lift prints. He told me which drawer to look in, what name to find. I was to do what he'd shown me. To put the print on the damaged wire. Just like the demonstration, he said. It'll be easy. You lying coward, Sykes snapped. You were the one who suggested. He stopped, but it was too late. Kramer was already moving. That's enough, Kramer said. Reginald Sykes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and for tampering with evidence in a homicide investigation. Fairchild, you're coming too. You can tell the DA how sorry you are. Sykes started to say something about lawyers and rights, then apparently remembered what room he was in and who he was. His shoulders slumped. He was going to ruin us, he said harshly. You have no idea what those photographs, those cards, what they represented. One man with a studio and a taste for drama could have taken down half of Manhattan. So you took him down first, I said. And tried to throw his brother under the bus as a bonus. It was an elegant solution, Sykes muttered. Elegant, Wolfe repeated, his lip curling. You stripped a cable, Mr. Sykes, and you stripped yourself. There is no elegance in using another man's fingerprint to kill him by proxy. It is merely crude. Kramer snapped the cuffs on Sykes. The sound was loud in the room. Vivian let out a long breath. So that's it, she said. No more shadow games. Don't kid yourself, I told her. There'll always be shadows. This city runs on them. We just retired one supplier. Chapter 8, Darkness Leaves a Mark. 3 days after Sykes went to see what the inside of a cell block looked like, the world began wobbling back toward normal. The papers had a field day. Fixer lawyer in electric death plot wasn't the worst headline. Wolfe got his mention as the brilliant private investigator who assisted police sources, which made him snort into his beer, and I got called an associate. I took it as a compliment. One afternoon Felicity Marsh came to the brownstone. Fritz supplied tea that impressed her. The office light was soft, the orchids upstairs were probably listening. The police have taken most of the cabinet, she told us. They say some of the negatives will be returned to their owners. Others will be destroyed. Good, Wolfe said. An archive of extortion is a poor foundation for art. I keep thinking, she said slowly, if I'd pushed harder, if I'd forced Maurice to fix the wiring, if I'd left, maybe he wouldn't have died. Wolfe shook his head. You are assigning yourself too much influence, he said. If the wiring had been perfect, Mr. Sykes would have devised another method. When a man deals in secrets the way he did, violence is merely a matter of timing. What will you do? I asked her. She lifted her chin. I'll run the studio, she said. The landlord offered me a new lease. We'll do honest work. Portraits. Weddings. No more insurance. No more hidden cards. If a client wants a negative destroyed, I'll destroy it. That may lower your income, Wolfe observed. It'll let me sleep, she replied. Lionel Kittering came by the next day, shuffling in like he expected us to slam the door. We didn't. Wolfe even had Fritz bring sandwiches. I suppose I should thank you, Lionel said awkwardly, sitting on the edge of the red chair. Inspector Kramer says it was your idea about the fingerprint cards. You should thank circumstances, Wolfe said. If you had been a more forceful man, you might have attempted to confront your brother. Then the fingerprint would have been real, and our task harder. I never understood him, Lionel said. Maurice. He was always laughing. Even when he hurt people. I thought he'd just go on being irresponsible forever. I didn't think anyone would kill him. Men like Maurice, Wolfe said, collect flammable material and then carry matches. Sometimes they burn, sometimes they merely scorch others. This time the fire found him first. Lionel nodded, not really understanding but wanting to. After he left, Vivian Vale sent a note. No visit, just a card with an embossed V and a single sentence. Thank you for putting the right face in the frame. Wolfe read it, raised an eyebrow, and handed it to me. She should stick to dialogue other people write, he grumbled. That evening, after the house settled into its usual rhythm and Kramer had called to say Fairchild had turned state's evidence, I leaned back in my chair and looked at Wolfe. One thing, I said. You liked Sykes for it pretty early. What clinched it? He tipped his head. He was the only one, Wolfe said, who dealt professionally with both scandal and control. Kittering played with leverage as a child plays with marbles. Sykes invested in it. When a man like that begins a sentence about a dead associate with a tragic business and ends it talking about potential ruin, you know where his mind lives. And the title? I asked. You said once that Darkness had left a fingerprint. It had, he said. Sykes believed that cutting the light would hide his hand. But in preparing his accident, stripping the cable, choosing Lionel's card, he left marks more glaring than any photograph. We merely learned to read them. He reached for his beer, then paused. I will add, Archie, he said, that I do not care to have my own fingerprint on any photographer's card. If Mr. Kittering had attempted that, I might have taken steps. That's almost a joke, I said. Careful, your reputation. He grunted. You still intend to pose for this cursed magazine? He asked. They called, I said. Felicity offered to do the session herself. No tricks, no shadows, and no live wires. Strictly above board. He closed his eyes briefly, like a man accepting an unavoidable surgery. Very well, he said. One sitting, here, in this room, under my supervision. And I will examine the equipment first. If any cable looks as if it has been scratched, I will throw them out. I'll tell her, I said. You want them to bring a nice soft focus lens? Maybe a halo? Get out, he said mildly. I did. In the hall, I paused and looked back at the office. The light was warm, the books dark, the man in the big chair very solid. Outside, the city was full of lights and shadows. In some third-floor room, someone was probably lifting a glass or a letter or a print, thinking they were safe, forgetting that everything leaves a mark if you know where to look. In our case, it had been simple. Darkness left a fingerprint. And Nero Wolfe, sitting in his brownstone with his orchids and his beer and his oversized brain, had made it talk.